Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing at the edge of the Great Rift Valley 2.5 million years ago. The air is thick with heat, shimmering above the volcanic rocks that scatter the landscape like ancient scars. Acacia trees twist toward a merciless sun, their thorny branches offering little shade. And everywhere, danger. This is East Africa in the Pliocene epoch, a world that would kill you in 1,000 different ways before sunset. Saber-toothed cats prowl the grasslands. Hyenas circle in packs, their laughs echoing across the plains like mockery. Crocodiles lurk in every water source, patient as death itself. And towering above it all, megafauna that would make modern elephants look small. Now imagine trying to survive here. Not with guns. Not with steel. Not even with fire yet. Just your hands, your wits, and the fragile hope that tomorrow might come. This was home to our distant ancestors, a species we now call Homo habilis. The name means handyman, though when paleontologists first discovered their remains in Tanzania's Olduvai Gorge in 1960, they had no idea just how handy these early humans would prove to be. They stood about 4 feet tall, walked upright on 2 legs, and had brains roughly half the size of ours. By modern standards, you might not even recognize them as human. But they were. And they were about to change everything. Picture a small band of them now, moving through elephant grass taller than their heads. Maybe 8 or 9 individuals, moving carefully, quietly. They're not hunting. Not yet. They don't have the tools for that, the weapons, the confidence. They're scavengers, following the vultures, hoping to find what the lions left behind. And hoping the lions have actually left. This is survival at its most desperate edge. A successful day means finding a carcass before the hyenas claim it completely. It means cracking open bones for marrow while constantly watching the horizon for whatever killed the animal in the first place. Most days they go hungry. Some days they don't survive at all. Their hands can't tear through thick hide. Their teeth can't crush bones like a hyena's can. They're not fast enough to chase prey, not strong enough to fight off competitors. By every measure that matters in this brutal landscape, they should be irrelevant. Just another species struggling in the margins, destined for extinction. But there's something different happening inside their skulls. Something revolutionary. Their brains, though small by our standards, are growing. More importantly, they're changing. The prefrontal cortex is expanding, bringing with it new capabilities that no other creature on Earth possesses. Pattern recognition, cause and effect, abstract thinking, the ability to see not just what something is, but what it could become. One of them picks up a rock. Not unusual, but then something extraordinary happens. This individual doesn't just hold the rock. They study it. They turn it over in their hands, feeling its weight, examining its edges. And in that moment, a spark fires across neural pathways that have never quite connected this way before. This rock is hard, sharp in places. If struck against another rock just right, the sound cracks across the valley. Decisive. A rock splitting along its natural fracture lines, creating flakes with edges sharper than any tooth or claw evolution ever produced. The other members of the group stop. They turn. They watch. And they understand. This is the moment everything changes. This is the birth of technology. Not just tool use. Plenty of animals use tools. Chimps use sticks to fish for termites. Sea otters crack shells with rocks. But this is tool making. This is seeing potential where none existed before. This is imposing your will upon the physical world, reshaping it to serve your needs. The archaeological evidence for this moment is scattered across East Africa in sites that read like a timeline of human emergence. At Ghana in Ethiopia, we found stone tools dating back 2.6 million years. At Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where Mary and Louis Leakey spent decades uncovering our origins, layers upon layers of these early tools tell a story of persistence, of cultural transmission, of knowledge passed down through generations. We call them Oldowan tools, named after that famous gorge. They look simple to modern eyes, almost crude. Just stones struck against other stones to create sharp flakes. But don't let their simplicity fool you. Creating even these basic tools requires knowledge, planning, and manual dexterity far beyond what any other primate possesses. You need to select the right kind of stone. Not too brittle, not too soft. You need to understand angles, force, percussion. You need to hold one rock steady while striking it with another in precisely the right spot, at precisely the right angle, with precisely the right amount of force. Get it wrong and you waste materials. Get it very wrong, and you shatter bones in your own hand. And here's what makes it truly remarkable. Someone had to teach this. These weren't instincts hardwired by millions of years of evolution. This was learned behavior, cultural knowledge, passed from one individual to another through demonstration and practice. This was the first education, the first technology transfer, the first time in Earth's history that information flowed not through genetics but through teaching. Watch that small band again, gathering around the one who just created that first flake. They're not just observing, they're learning. The young ones pick up their own stones, attempting to replicate what they've seen. Most fail at first. The rocks don't break right, but they try again, and again, and slowly, painstakingly, the knowledge spreads. Within a generation, every member of this group knows how to make these tools. Within a few generations, nearby groups have learned it too. And once that knowledge exists, it never disappears. It only grows, adapts, improves. But here's the question that still haunts archaeologists and anthropologists. Was this invention or discovery? Did one genius ancestor sit down and reason out the principles of stone knapping through pure cognition? Or did someone accidentally crack a rock and suddenly recognize the potential in that accident? We'll probably never know for certain. But what we do know is this. Once that first sharp edge was created, everything changed. With tools, these small, vulnerable hominids could process food their teeth couldn't handle. They could cut through hide to access meat. They could smash bones to reach calorie-rich marrow. They could defend themselves, modify their environment, create shelter. With tools came calories. With calories came bigger brains. With bigger brains came better tools. And somewhere in that feedback loop, in that recursive cycle of innovation and improvement, something extraordinary emerged. Humanity. The climate was changing too, making survival even harder. East Africa was drying out, forests giving way to grasslands, resources spreading thinner across the landscape. For most species, this was a crisis. For Homo habilis, armed now with technology, it became an opportunity. They could exploit food sources that other species couldn't access. They could venture further from water sources because they could carry tools with them. They could adapt faster than evolution alone would allow because they were no longer bound by the slow crawl of genetic change. Cultural evolution had begun, and it moved at the speed of thought. Stand at that cliff edge again, looking out over the Rift Valley as the sun sets. That band of early humans is settling in for the night, huddled together for warmth and safety. Tomorrow they'll wake to the same dangers, the same struggles, the same brutal landscape that shows no mercy. But now they have something new. Something no predator possesses, no matter how sharp its teeth or powerful its jaws. They have the ability to reshape reality itself, to take the raw materials of the earth and forge them into extensions of their own will. That simple stone flake, sharp enough to cut through hide and tendon, represents more than just a tool. It represents a threshold crossed, a boundary eroded between what is and what could be. It represents the moment when hands learned to shape the world. And once that lesson was learned, there would be no going back. Only forward, into an unknown future where these clever, curious, relentlessly innovative creatures would eventually spread to every corner of the earth, transforming everything they touched. But that's a story for another time. For now, as darkness falls over the ancient valley, our ancestors clutch their precious tools close. Tomorrow, they'll use them to survive another day. And the day after that. And the day after that, one sharp edge at a time, they're building the foundation of everything that follows. Every innovation, every discovery, every triumph of human ingenuity traces its lineage back to this moment, to this place, to these remarkable beings who looked at a stone and saw a possibility. The awakening has begun. 1,000,000 years have passed since those first stone flakes changed everything. The world is colder now, harsher. Ice sheets creep down from the poles, locking water away in frozen fortresses, transforming landscapes with each glacial advance and retreat. And walking through this transformed world is a new kind of human. Homo erectus, upright man. They stand nearly 6 feet tall, with long legs built for covering distance and bodies adapted for endurance that would humble modern athletes. Their brains are larger, more complex, capable of thoughts and plans that would have been impossible for their ancestors. And in their hands, they carry something that represents a quantum leap in human sophistication. Not just a tool, a work of art. Welcome to 1.7 million years ago, to the Acheulean era, named after Saint Achille in France, where these remarkable artifacts were first discovered. But the story doesn't begin in Europe. It begins, like so much of our story, in Africa. Picture the shores of ancient Lake Turkana in what we now call Kenya. A Homo erectus individual sits on a flat rock, focused with an intensity that borders on meditation. In one hand, a large stone. In the other, a hammer stone made of harder material. And slowly, methodically, with strike after careful strike, something emerges from the raw rock. A hand axe. But calling it just an axe feels inadequate, like calling the Mona Lisa just a painting. This tool is symmetrical, elegant, teardrop-shaped with careful flaking on both sides, creating a continuous cutting edge. Running your finger along its surface, you'd feel the precision of each strike, the deliberate removal of flakes to create not just function but form. This takes hours to make. It requires planning dozens of strikes in advance, visualizing the final product before it exists, adjusting each blow based on how the stone responds. This isn't just hitting rocks together anymore. This is craftsmanship. This is art serving utility. This is the human mind imposing order and beauty onto chaos. And here's what makes it truly mysterious. This design remains virtually unchanged for over 1,000,000 years. 1,000,000 years. Think about that. We went from the first airplane to landing on the moon in just 66 years. We went from room-sized computers to smartphones in a few decades. But the hand axe? Perfect on the first major iteration, it seems. So perfect that generation after generation, across continents and millennia, humans kept making them exactly the same way. Were they truly perfect for their purpose? Or did human cognition simply not yet possess the creative flexibility to imagine something better? We still debate this question in archaeological circles, and the answer matters more than you might think. It speaks to how human innovation actually works, how ideas spread, how cultures evolve. But while the hand axe remained constant, something else was changing. Something that would prove even more transformative than any blade or point. Fire. Deep in Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, archaeologists discovered evidence that made them reconsider everything they thought they knew about human development. Ash deposits, burn bones, oxidized sediments, all dating back 1,000,000 years, perhaps even 1.8 million years. And halfway around the world, at Gesher Benat Yaakov in Israel, more evidence emerged from 790,000 years ago. Controlled fire, deliberate fire, human fire. Imagine being the first to truly control it. Not just opportunistically using fire started by lightning, but creating it, maintaining it, keeping the flames alive day after day, night after night. The power that represents is almost godlike in its implications. Darkness, humanity's ancient enemy, suddenly becomes negotiable. Caves transform from dens of danger into sanctuaries of safety. Predators with their superior night vision lose their advantage because now humans control the light. Raw meat, tough and dangerous, becomes cooked food that's easier to digest, safer to eat, and delivers more calories with less effort. And this is where the biology gets fascinating. As cooking became widespread, something remarkable happened to the human body. Our guts got smaller. We didn't need massive digestive systems anymore because fire was essentially predigesting our food. And all that energy that would have gone into maintaining a large digestive system, it got redirected to our brains. Fire, it turns out, wasn't just a tool. It was an evolutionary catalyst. Bigger brains meant more complex thinking. More complex thinking meant better tools, better strategies, better cooperation. And fire became the center of human social life. Gather around the flames at night, and something magical happens. Stories get told. Knowledge gets shared. Bonds form. Culture deepens. But fire did something else too. It made humans dangerous in entirely new ways. Watch a hunting party of Homo erectus now, moving across the savanna with purpose and precision. They're not scavenging anymore, not waiting for predators to finish their kills. They're tracking, following footprints in the dust, reading broken branches and disturbed grass like a language only they understand. Their quarry is a herd of antelope, grazing in the distance, unaware of the patient hunters converging from multiple directions. This is persistence hunting, and it's one of the most remarkable strategies in the animal kingdom. Humans aren't fast. Most prey can outrun us in a sprint without breaking a sweat. But over distance? Over hours of relentless pursuit in the midday heat? Nothing can match human endurance. Our ancestors would identify a target and simply follow it. Hour after hour, never letting it rest, never letting it cool down, pushing it beyond the limits of its cardiovascular system. Antelope, kudu, even zebra, all faster than humans in short bursts, all helpless against human stamina over time. Eventually, the prey would literally collapse from heat exhaustion. No fight, no dramatic confrontation, just the inevitable conclusion of biology meeting strategy. Evidence for this comes from ancient trackways preserved in mud turned to stone, showing human footprints alongside prey animals. It comes from butchery sites where the cut marks on bones tell us exactly how these ancient hunters processed their kills: systematic, efficient, practiced. This wasn't luck. This was skill refined over thousands of generations. But the truly revolutionary moment came about 400,000 years ago, in a place that seems impossibly far from humanity's African origins. Northern Germany, a peat bog near the town of Skaaningen. Archaeologists expected nothing remarkable. Peat bogs are archaeological graveyards, places where organic material rots away, leaving nothing but stone and bone. But then they found something that should have been impossible. 8 wooden spears, preserved perfectly by the oxygen-free environment, each one over 6 feet long, carefully shaped, deliberately weighted for throwing. These weren't simple pointed sticks. These were engineered projectiles. The thickest, heaviest part was positioned about 1/3 of the way from the point, exactly where modern javelins are weighted for optimal flight. Someone, 400,000 years ago, understood physics and aerodynamics well enough to design throwing weapons that would make modern athletes nod in recognition. With spears came a fundamental shift in human capability. Now distance became an ally. You could kill a massive animal without getting close enough for it to kill you back. You could coordinate with others, throwing from multiple angles, bringing down prey that would have been suicidal to confront directly. Mammoths, cave bears, woolly rhinoceros. The megafauna that dominated the Ice Age landscapes were no longer simply threats to avoid. They became resources to exploit. And the archaeological record shows us that humans did exactly that again and again across every continent they reached. But spears required something even more sophisticated than the weapons themselves. They required coordination, planning, communication complex enough to convey strategy, assign roles, and adjust tactics in real time. You couldn't persistence hunt alone. Someone had to track while others drove the prey. You couldn't bring down a mammoth without multiple hunters striking simultaneously at vulnerable points. This means language. Real language, with grammar and tense and the ability to discuss things that haven't happened yet, will drive them toward the cliff. When they turn, you strike from the left. That's not simple communication. That's abstract thinking made verbal, shared consciousness translated into coordinated action. Tool-making itself became a social activity, a tradition passed from skilled hands to learning ones. Knowledge became cumulative. The best way to shape a hand axe, the ideal length for a spear, the technique for starting fire, all of this information flowed through generations not as genetic inheritance but as cultural transmission. Humans were evolving socially now, faster than biology alone could ever manage. And then we encounter one of the most haunting mysteries in human history: the Neanderthals. They appear in Europe and Western Asia around 400,000 years ago, perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions with stocky builds that conserved heat, massive muscles that could overpower prey, and brains actually larger than modern humans. They made sophisticated Mysterian tools, refined, purpose-specific, elegant. They buried their dead with apparent ceremony. They cared for injured and elderly members of their groups. They were, by every measurable standard, intelligent, successful, and perfectly suited to their environment. And yet, around 40,000 years ago, they vanished. Not through some dramatic catastrophe, but through a slow decline that correlates almost perfectly with the arrival of modern humans in their territories. What happened? Competition for resources? Interbreeding that diluted their population? Some cognitive advantage that Homo sapiens possessed that Neanderthals didn't? We found Neanderthal DNA in modern humans, proving we interbred successfully. We've found their tools, their art, their settlements. We know they were capable, adaptable, and resilient. But we survived and they didn't. The answer might lie in innovation itself. Neanderthals were excellent at what they did, but their tool technology remained relatively static over hundreds of thousands of years. Modern humans, by contrast, seem to iterate constantly, innovating not just tools but entire systems of thinking, creating, and adapting. We made better weapons, yes, but we also made art, jewelry, musical instruments, and complex social structures that could incorporate new ideas from different groups. We were, it seems, evolution's ultimate improvisers. And in the brutal arithmetic of survival, that flexibility proved decisive. By 50,000 years ago, modern humans were spreading out of Africa armed with technology that would have seemed like magic to earlier hominids. Composite tools that combined stone, wood, and bone. Atlatls that multiplied throwing force. Tailored clothing that allowed survival in environments that should have been fatal. And most importantly, minds capable of abstract thought, symbolic reasoning, and endless innovation. The hunt had evolved from desperate scavenging to coordinated strategy to technological dominance. And that dominance would soon extend to every ecosystem on Earth, transforming not just how humans lived, but the very face of the planet itself. The question wasn't whether humans could survive anymore. The question was whether anything could survive us. 50,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened. Not a single invention, not one brilliant discovery, but an explosion of creativity so profound that archaeologists still struggle to explain it. The Upper Paleolithic Revolution. The Great Leap Forward. Call it what you will. This was the moment when modern humans became truly unstoppable. From the caves of France to the coastlines of Australia, from the steppes of Siberia to the southern tip of Africa, Homo sapiens were suddenly creating at a pace evolution had never witnessed. And it all started with looking at stone in entirely new ways. Imagine a camp in what is now southern France, 40,000 years ago. Snow blankets the landscape. Mammoths move in the distance like walking mountains. And inside a rock shelter, illuminated by firelight, a craftsman is working with precision that would make earlier toolmakers weep with envy. They're making blades. Not hand axes. Not simple flakes. Blades, long, parallel-sided, wickedly sharp implements struck from a carefully prepared stone core. One core, properly managed, can produce dozens of blades. Each blade has more cutting edge than an entire hand axe. The efficiency is staggering, the mathematics elegant. This is blade technology, and it represents a cognitive quantum leap. You can't just strike randomly and hope for blades. You need to prepare the core first, removing specific flakes to create the right angles, the right platform. You need to strike with precise force at precise points in a precise sequence. One mistake, and the core is ruined. Get it right, and you've got enough cutting tools to last months. But that's just the beginning. Watch as the craftsman takes one of these blades and sets it into a wooden handle using pine resin mixed with ochre as adhesive. Now it's not just a stone. It's a knife with a handle, an extension of the hand, comfortable to grip and devastating to use. This is composite tool technology, combining multiple materials to create something greater than the sum of its parts. Archaeologists call this hafting, and the implications are profound. You're no longer limited by what stone alone can do. You can create specialized tools for specific tasks. Scrapers for preparing hides. Burins for engraving bone. Needles, actual-eyed needles made from bone, for sewing tailored clothing that fits the body, traps heat, and allows humans to survive in environments that should be absolutely fatal. And they did exactly that. Modern humans pushed into northern Europe during the Ice Age, into Siberia where winter temperatures dropped to -40 degrees, into environments no primate had any business surviving. But with tailored clothing, controlled fire, and sophisticated shelters, they didn't just survive. They thrived. The archaeological sites from this era read like an inventory of human ingenuity. Bone harpoons for fishing. Fish hooks that let you access protein sources unavailable to landlocked hunters. Atlatls, spear throwers that use leverage to multiply throwing force, extending effective hunting range by 50% or more. Every material available became a potential tool. Antler, ivory, wood, sinew, bone, all transformed into weapons, tools, and art. Because that's the other stunning development of this era. Humans started creating things that had no practical purpose whatsoever. Cave paintings, carved figurines, musical instruments made from bird bones and mammoth ivory, jewelry carved from shells transported hundreds of miles from the nearest coast. This is symbolic thinking made manifest. This is saying, I exist, and I want to leave a mark that outlasts me. Deep in caves at Lascaux, Chauvet, Altamira, humans painted animals with such skill and artistry that when these images were first discovered in the 19th century, scholars refused to believe ancient people could have created them. The paintings were too good, too sophisticated, too beautiful. But they were real. And they tell us that by 40,000 years ago, humans weren't just surviving. They were telling stories, recording their world, expressing ideas that transcended immediate survival. They were, in every sense that matters, us. The hunting technology reached its apex during this period. The atlatl, that simple stick with a hook on one end, changed everything about projectile warfare. By extending the length of the thrower's arm through leverage, it could propel a dart with enough force to penetrate thick hide from 40 meters away. Hunting became safer, more efficient, less dependent on raw strength and more on skill and accuracy. Then came the bow. Exactly when it was invented remains mysterious. The oldest definitive evidence comes from around 12,000 years ago in Germany, from a site called Stellmoor where dozens of pine arrow shafts were preserved in peat. But it may be much older. Bows don't preserve well, and indirect evidence suggests they might have existed tens of thousands of years earlier. With bows came revolutionary capability. Silent, accurate, deadly at range. You could hunt birds in flight, small mammals in underbrush, fish in shallow water. You could defend your group from threats before they got close enough to be dangerous. The bow was the ultimate weapon of the Stone Age, and it would remain humanity's primary projectile technology for tens of thousands of years, only finally made obsolete by gunpowder. But as human hunting technology improved, something else was happening. Something we're still trying to fully understand. The megafauna were disappearing. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths the size of elephants, saber-toothed cats, woolly rhinoceros, cave bears, giant elk with antlers 12 feet across, all of them vanishing, continent by continent, almost always shortly after humans arrived. In Australia 45,000 years ago. In Europe 30,000 years ago. In North America just 13,000 years ago, coinciding so precisely with human arrival that it's impossible to ignore. Was it us? Climate change? Some combination of both? The debate rages in scientific journals and conferences with passionate advocates on all sides. But the pattern is undeniable. Humans arrive. Large animals disappear. Over and over again, across every continent except Africa, and Africa, tellingly, is where humans evolved slowly alongside these animals, giving them millions of years to adapt to our presence. Everywhere else, we arrived suddenly, armed with sophisticated weapons and cooperative hunting strategies, and the megafauna had no evolutionary preparation for what we represented. One study suggests that human hunting pressure didn't even need to be intense. Just removing a few breeding adults per generation from slow reproducing species was enough to push them toward extinction over centuries. If true, this means something sobering. We've been reshaping ecosystems, driving extinctions, and transforming the natural world not for decades or centuries, but for tens of thousands of years. Our impact on the planet isn't a modern phenomenon. It's fundamental to what we are. And there's an irony in this, dark and profound. Better tools made hunting more efficient. More efficient hunting meant more food. More food meant larger populations. Larger populations meant more pressure on resources. And eventually, that pressure became unsustainable. By 12,000 years ago, the megafauna were mostly gone. The easy calories had vanished. And humans faced a choice: adapt or decline. Some groups did decline, but others did something revolutionary. Instead of following the herds, they began to control them. Instead of gathering wild plants, they began to cultivate them. The Neolithic Revolution was beginning. Agriculture, domestication, permanent settlements. And with those changes, the Stone Age would eventually give way to copper, bronze, iron, and everything that followed. But none of it would have been possible without those first stone tools, those first sparks of innovation struck 2.6 million years ago by our ancestors who learned to see potential in a simple rock. Every technological advancement we've made, from smartphones to spacecraft, traces its conceptual lineage back to that foundational insight. Humans can reshape the world to suit their needs. We don't have to accept reality as given. We can impose our will upon it, one innovation at a time. The mysteries remain haunting and beautiful. We don't know how much knowledge was lost when organic materials decayed. How many wooden tools, leather innovations, fiber technologies vanished without trace. We don't know exactly what we learned from Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other human species now extinct but whose DNA flows through our veins. We don't know why some innovations spread rapidly while others took thousands of years to travel across continents. But we know the result. From those first crude flakes to the refined artistry of the Upper Paleolithic, stone tools carried humanity from the margins of survival to absolute dominance over every ecosystem we encountered. We learned to think abstractly, plan sequentially, teach deliberately, and innovate constantly. Stand now in any museum of natural history. Find a glass case containing a hand axe, perhaps 1.5 million years old. Look at its symmetry, its craftsmanship, its edge still sharp after all those millennia. That tool was held by hands not quite human, wielded by minds on the threshold of everything we would become. And if you could ask that ancient craftsmen what they were creating, they wouldn't tell you they were making an axe. They were making survival possible. They were making tomorrow a little more likely. They were making, without knowing it, the foundation for everything that would follow. From stone to steel, from hand axes to microchips, From survival to civilization, this is the unbroken chain of human innovation. And it started with a single revolutionary thought. What if we could change this? That question, asked in prehistoric Africa by our distant ancestors, echoes still in every laboratory, every workshop, every mind that looks at the world and imagines it different, imagines it better. This is who we are. This is who we've always been. The species that shapes reality itself, one innovation at a time. If this journey through human innovation fascinated you, if you want to explore more mysteries of our ancient past, then subscribe to this channel. We're diving deep into the stories that shaped humanity, from the first footsteps out of Africa to the rise of ancient civilizations, from evolutionary mysteries to archaeological discoveries that rewrite what we thought we knew. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we uncover the extraordinary story of how we became human. Because understanding where we came from is the first step to understanding where we're going. See you in the next exploration.